Okay, I'd like to call the CBPAC meeting to order. I guess we have to start with a roll call here. Yes, no?
Well, since we don't have a quorum,
Mm-hmm.
I guess we can just start.
Okay.
If we do, we can roll call formally and start.
Okay. I guess, any public comments? No? Okay. Guess we can't approve the minutes here. Brad, do you have a suggestion on which item you want to talk about right now?
Well, number 4.
Number 4. Oh, we can still go with number 4. Okay, I guess it's not an action item. So okay. All right. Item number 4, white paper for the Countywide bike and pedestrian plan update.
Thanks. Our consultant team has put together an issue paper, and they are here. Megan Mittman and Patrick Gilster are here, and they will present the issue paper and ask for some feedback on how to present it, especially on what to do with the town hall that we plan to have next month or early in November. So with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Great. Thanks, Brad. So we have just wrapped up writing this long paper for you guys all to look at different ways we can actually update the CBPP. So we've kind of restructured the way we normally approach plans. So this way, for this plan, we've gone to the public outreach first, and now we're here talking about what can be updated, and then we'll move to the existing conditions. So I can give you a quick overview of kind of today is more introducing you to the white paper and what we kind of would like your input on and what we envision the CBPAC's role being with the plan update. So this will be a relatively quick presentation. So just project overview to date. So we did a lot of data collection and public outreach. So we did 9 different pop-up events around the county to make sure we balanced them to each RTPC area. And then we have now gone over the summer and written the strategic white paper that there's a link for in the agenda. And that's also posted to keepcontracostamoving.net. So we kind of envision this group being able to help promote that website and help promote that on each city's jurisdiction website. But then also to actually look through each of the strategies and help us recommend what's next. So we kind of broke all of the strategies up to create the candidate best practices for the CBPP. So this really divided all of our recommended strategies into these 6 categories, and then the final being the next steps. So we looked at different ways we could apply each of these throughout the plan update. Sorry, I'm a little sick, so bear with me. So collaborating is working with the public and our different partners to develop coordinated bikeway and pedestrian systems that can be knit together. Prioritize is actually looking at ways to prioritize either the projects from the last plan or in the projects that we will add to the plan. I think the last plan was about $300 million worth of projects that were spread across the county. So this could be a way that we could look at giving a different strategy to actually prioritize and rank those to move forward. Innovate, so looking at different practices and approaches that are newer that we can add to the plan, either whether that be as design guidelines or recommended types of projects that could feed into the prioritization. And then improvements, so making improvements to the previous practices and finding different ways to build on those. Involve, so looking at different ways the public outreach can be augmented or different requirements for those, and working with different public and private staff, potentially doing more technical assistance programs and things like that. There's also tracking, so making sure that we follow on our progress and making sure we're staying on top of that. And so looking at each different RTPC area and looking at the countywide as a whole. So there are a plethora of strategies that we've put together. And we've kind of put together a way to approach the white paper that you see in your agenda and kind of having different notes you can take as you go through these. So we'll be looking for your feedback on how do you envision us applying these specific strategies and whether or not we should be applying them with the CBPP update. So at a regional plan level, whether or not these are relevant or not is something we'd like to have your input on. So this will help introduce and discuss the recent trends in bicycle and pedestrian planning, and then we'll appreciate to have you guys help with evaluating the value and relevance for each strategy. And then that will help us prioritize what is actually going to get updated from the previous plan with this plan. So, and then we'd like your help spreading the word. So we've posted a link to the white paper on, as I mentioned, keepcontracostamoving.net and on the different social media and jurisdiction web pages. We'd really look to encourage you to invite staff to the RTPC meetings that will actually be going over each of these strategies and talking about the regional network. And then helping us to promote the interactive web map and surveys. Those will still be up for another month. And then once we wrap up the RTPC meetings, and looking forward to the online town hall that will be coming up, so that the presentation similar that the RTPCs will get with all the strategies, but more oriented toward the public versus people who already know what we're generally talking about. So we'll have more promotional materials that will be coming together once that date gets finalized, and looking for ways to do that. And then the next steps. So the way we envision working with the CB pack is, so today we're giving you an introduction to what the white paper is and how we'd like your feedback. So we're going to then go and meet with each RTPC TAC and then do the online town hall. And then we'll actually come back to the CB pack at the end of this to discuss all of the results. And that way we really envision the CB pack helping us narrow down what our top priorities are from the public side, from the RTPC TAC side. And then that will help us look at the different network and focus areas to develop for both the regional plan, networks, and for the actual strategies in the plan. And then we'll move to the draft and final CBPP. So I think we're shooting for around April, I think was our target goal for adoption. So lots of moving pieces.
Remind them of Transpac on Thursday.
Yes, so we will be meeting with the Transpac RTPC on Thursday, and we will be presenting at 10 o'clock, but the meeting starts at 9, I think, off the top of my head. And then... and then I think the last question we really had was around the online town hall that will be oriented to the public. We really wanted some feedback on whether or not we have opinions on a lunchtime version of that being most effective or an evening version being most effective. So we've kind of come across both ways of people could take their lunchtime to be respectful for employers to watch the presentation then and interact with the voting criteria then. It will be recorded regardless, so we'll be able to update. People will still be able to look at it later, or whether or not we'll get a bigger or a larger viewership at more of a 6 p.m. versus a 12 p.m. So looking for feedback from you guys what you think would be most effective.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, I got a question back on the strategies and the options. We're asking the RTPCs to kind of give feedback on these. Are all the categories planned on being in the plan? In other words, are we trying to rank the strategies among the categories? Or do we want the categories ranked as well?
I guess it's
Or just feedback on the whole outline here?
I guess it's more feedback on the whole outline. If there are certain parts that RTPCs would not like included
Or emphasized?
then yeah, they can rank
Okay.
among each other.
So it's not like trying to rank everything 1 to 12 or something?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
James?
Along those lines, with respect to, I guess it would be collaboration, or whichever category is the umbrella for public outreach.
Yes.
There's already been some, I guess, in the county, and then the online town hall, or maybe phone call town hall will proceed. If there's going to be additional, like, meet them where they are, so to speak, events, does that affect I'm more concerned about the overall plan budget and timeline. Is that going to shift?
It's less so what to add to this plan and just a different way to focus it on projects moving forward. So as you do implementation of projects, should you have public outreach attached to that? Should you look at different projects through an equity standpoint when you're doing it? Or for when cities then go to do their own plans per se, the regional plan would then say you should do these types of outreach events. So it's just providing additional options and strategies for that as opposed to going back and doing additional public outreach.
Okay, so that helps clarify then another question for me is that these best practices for consideration may be part of like an implementation section of the CBPP
Correct. Yes.
going forward as a strategy for all the adopting agencies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it's less so sometimes of what the plan itself will do and just different ways the plan can encourage jurisdictions to use these types of best practices.
Yeah, some of them are going to be things that would be included in the plan as part of the plan, and some would be implementation task. For example, the establishment of a low traffic stress network, that would be something that would be in the plan, but that would be used also in implementation and selecting projects perhaps. When we look at what projects should we fund first in some later funding cycle, what project should we emphasize or support? If we support a project that's applying for another funding source, we might say, well, if the project's on the low traffic stress network, then that's a project we'll definitely support and give priority in funding.
Can I do one more follow-up?
Yes.
So will this white paper be attached or appended to the final plan? The reason I ask is because even if it's not this particular version, if it's one commented by this and other agencies, to me this is, first of all, I think it's very good material, and it could be a guide, a reference point for any agency that picks it up after the final plan is adopted, and they kind of have like a quote-unquote playbook or reference of material for approaching their implementation. Just a suggestion at this point.
I imagine the plan itself will have a summary of what the results are from our analysis and public outreach for the white paper, and then I would imagine the white paper itself will be an appendix.
And there are a couple of the strategies that are in the issue paper that talk about adding this as part of having some of these strategies as amending the guidance where best practices that are recommended. So in a sense, parts of it, depending on what feedback we get, will be incorporated into the plan itself as a best practice or as a guidance. So we'll still have, as Patrick says, some note or discussion of how we dealt with the issues and the response to the issues that are in the issue paper. But there also will be some guidance on best practices as well.
Bruce?
Thank you. On the collaborate section, the number 1 portion, regional backbone bikeway network planning, I really like the look of that. Since this is a county-wide bike plan, it seems to me that we should emphasize getting between the jurisdictions. It's good that we offer help to the jurisdictions for complete streets, for parking, for interfacing between buses and bicycles. But really, it seems to me, we want to help or at least allow someone to bicycle between, say, East County and Central County, or Central County and West County. And right now, safe routes are, shall I say, sorely lacking there. So I am very glad you put it as number 1.
And I didn't touch on it as much, but I can too. So the network focus area development will be actually after we go through the white paper process. We've been updating with the jurisdictions. A lot of you have received our requests for GIS files and things like that. So we've updated the previous CCTA regional files. So those are the most up-to-date ones we have, and then we'll be sending those back to each jurisdiction with an interactive web map come probably a month from now, or a month and a half from now-ish, once we figure out the white paper topics results. And then that'll give the jurisdictions one more opportunity to review the regional network. So really looking at our cross barriers connections, so the freeway ramps, the larger rivers, railroads, things like that, and ways to get between each jurisdiction. So helping to reconcile some of those.
Thank you, Robert. You're mentioning that a lot of these strategies will be not only incorporated in the plan, but for development of the plan. And I'm wondering, I was just noticing under involve, the strategy of involve, in the white paper, you have, where is it? Bear with me. I'll find it. Here it is. This series of strategies stresses the importance of public outreach and engagement during the plan development. It's really during the plan development as well as the plan. I lost for words. Development and implementation. Thank you. So I can assume that when we're talking about this at our RTPC.
And a lot of those strategies we've already kind of wrapped into some of the development of the plan too. So
Right.
The pop-up events and different
Sure.
outreach strategies.
I know. Good. Okay, thank you.
Bruce?
Yes, thank you. Under prioritize, item 3, consider equity in funding decisions. My pet hobby right now is urging the CCTA to, as part of the improvements of the 680-4 interchange, which is in round numbers a $500 million project, to include a little something, just a few crumbs from the table, just pocket change between the couch cushions for bicyclists. Right now there's no safe crossing of 680. And right now, the CCTA is saying we already have our environmental documents, so bicycles and pedestrians are out in the cold. And I would certainly like to see consideration of equity in there. Just 1% would get a very nice crossing of that interchange, connecting, say, the Canal Trail with the Iron Horse Trail with a stop off at the Pacheco Transit Hub. That would be wonderful. But that's a project. However, I'm attacking that project by saying considering equity in funding decisions.
Actually, I have a quick question just to reiterate again. Can you give a timeline? You actually you said the final plan will be in April.
So the final plan will be in April. So we're looking to wrap up the white paper and the online town hall come beginning of November. And then from there, we'll actually be able to start working on the regional network. So probably sometime in November, December range to finalize that. And during that same time, we can take the results of the white paper topics in the RTPC meetings and actually start updating the previous plan. So looking for draft plan, I think we said sometime around late January, early February. And then that should get us through the revision stages, February, March into April.
Okay, and as a follow-up, because I see on the screen here, it says meeting with CBPAC to discuss results. So would that be in January or November? Or?
It would be earlier than that in November.
Okay, November. Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, in November, we should have, we'll have all the RTPC tax done. We'll have the online meeting results. So that's what we'd bring back to you is some assessment of what we heard at pop-ups and RTPC tax and all the other outreach that we did.
Okay, thank you. James?
As far as the discussion of results goes, are the results of the public outreach from the online town hall as well as potentially the data collected to that point so that CBPAC has an understanding of where we are and how much more information we might need?
Correct. Yes. Yes, should have all of those components from the public outreach that we've done from the pop-up events and the survey online and the interactive web map, and then from the RTPC tax, what we've heard from them, and then the online town hall. So we'll bring all of that we envision us moving forward, and just making sure we're all on the same page and that we get the direction we need from the CBPAC before we start updating the chapters of the plan.
And as Patrick mentioned earlier, if you know anyone who would like to fill out our survey or to go to the interactive map and to leave comments, Google Chrome works best. I can assure you that that is the case, as it says on the web map. But if you know someone who has an opinion and would like to share it with us, please send them to the keepcontracostamoving.net website and fill out the survey and go on to the interactive map.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, Paul?
Can you elaborate a little bit about I've never heard of this bike superhighway.
There was a different way of looking at trails, potentially. So it's not only looking at the trail width itself, but also making sure we look at crossings. So in Europe, for instance, they're all grade separated and things like that. The way we've been doing it on the West Coast so far is looking at different ways to address different types of crossings. So if it's a 2-lane crossing or if it's an arterial crossing, there are different signalized or lower cost options than just saying, let's add an overcrossing. The Treat Boulevard one is very beautiful, but it's very expensive, so there's often near-term improvements and things like that we can look at in the shorter term. And also then looking at different ways to separate the bicyclist and pedestrian volumes in the different facility types. So just looking at the different design options for those types of trails. If you expect the bike volumes to be much higher, that way you get less conflicts between the bikes and the peds.
Bruce?
A follow-on to that, where we can cross collector streets and arterial streets using traffic signals, that would be my preference rather than an overcrossing. But where we cannot cross railroads or canals or freeways, my preference would be spending the money there so that we can at least get across it. Although it might be nice to have our overcrossing here on Treat. Very nice. I do not dislike that crossing, but we just don't have enough money to put a nice overcrossing at every arterial street when we can't get across freeways.
Yeah, we did a similar project for the city of Dublin, actually, just looking at the Ironhorse Trail through their city. It actually came up with, there were 2 different major intersections, one at Dublin Boulevard and one at Doherty. And so the Dublin Boulevard one had such a greater volume, and the angles were just so off that to go through the intersection just wasn't a good desire line for people trying to use the trail, and actually acted as a deterrent to using the trail because people were too scared to go across the major arterial roadway. So ended up recommending an overcrossing there, but then at Doherty, the desire lines were much easier, with a little bit lower of a volume, and you could do easier signal improvements to get the level of traffic stress for the crossing to be a lot greater than you could get at the Dublin Boulevard example. So there's different matrices and flow charts we have to be able to kind of figure out what types of improvements are appropriate at each location. So.
Any other comments, questions?
Are there any comments on any of the particular strategies that things that you think are particularly good ideas, or things that you think that we're not going to find a lot of support for when we go out to the RTPCs or do the online town hall?
Bobby, if I could just jump in, the quick build concept. I think Telegraph Avenue was the case study for that. I think that's something that is intriguing as, multimodal projects become more visible, either the need for or the study of, to show a way where it can be a very dynamic process and also be implemented relatively cost effectively and with the input desired. I think anecdotally, jurisdictions have, tried to balance meeting all the stakeholders' requirements in a timely manner. And I think that in a way to follow that quick build template to the extent feasible would be a good case for, following on with more and more projects like that.
And it's a good way to evaluate your investments before you go to some of the bigger class 4 facilities with curbs and things like that.
Right.
Allows you to tweak some of the designs. So.
And if I can actually add, this might be a little bit tangential, but I happen to have the opportunity to look at Venice Boulevard in Los Angeles, and I don't know if they followed the same process, but if you're looking for another case study, they did do a protected bikeway with parking shifted from the curb, and I think it's very similar to Telegraph Avenue, so I don't know if there's an application there.
Bruce?
I would like to see the NACTO guidelines included in this document so that when CCTA adopts the document, it says that any jurisdiction in the county then can automatically use the NACTO guidelines without having to adopt those guidelines themselves. You're nodding. You were going to do that anyway?
It's an option. That's on the
It's
table.
an option,
That's
okay.
something- The plan can be used for that exact purpose if that's how the jurisdictions find it to be most helpful.
Could you repeat that? It could be used for that purpose, and then you said?
If that's how the jurisdictions and the RTPCs find that to be the most helpful.
Okay.
I will say that Caltrans has endorsed those guidelines. I mean, they did try to make a big splash when they endorsed them. Doesn't mean they're part of the highway design manual, and you still have to, when you're engineering whatever improvement, you have to go through, you have to say, we're using the NACTO guidelines to make this exception to the highway design manual. So it's not exactly part of the highway design manual, but you can use it to base your exception on.
We
Good.
often include them in design guidelines for plans specifically. So references to both the urban bikeway design guidelines and the AASHTO Green Book and stuff like that. Gives you the thing to point to say it's included in the CBPP update or something like that.
Okay. I would like to see it specifically adopted in the plan saying any jurisdiction that wants to can use it without having adopted the guidelines themselves. All right? I want it to be really strong, not just mentioned as a possibility, but really strong. That might not, in fact, then get adopted, but I want to see it in the plan, and then we have to throw it out of the plan rather than saying, well, we could add it to the plan, if that's acceptable and legal. Okay, thank you.
I have one comment or question. First, my apologies if I missed it in here, but is there anywhere here in the white paper anything about like public health or any health benefits? And if not, I'd like to see something addressed.
There's nothing specifically off the top of my head, I don't think, related to public health, other than when we mentioned the equity focus, there's different ways to use CalEnviroscreen, which takes into account a lot of the health metrics, but there aren't specific health outcomes that are addressed with that. So that's a different, there could be a section specifically to address public health, or it could be added to the performance metrics or the prioritization criteria, or finding some other way to incorporate that into one of the existing categories.
I think that's what I mean. More showing in here, like, oh, here are the health benefits of adding more bike and ped facilities. So yeah.
I'm kind of looking, that puzzle look on my face. It's the performance metrics. I think that's a great place for including these health benefits or scoring. Thank you.
James?
As far as Vision Zero and systemic safety, this is kind of like a comment/question. It's my understanding that a select few communities have formally adopted Vision Zero. Is this then included in the white paper as a potential, as a way to try to encourage or incentivize communities to go in that direction? Or I'm kind of just trying to understand what the outcome might be of including that type of best practice in this scenario.
So there's different ways, and Megan's probably a little bit better to speak on Vision Zero, but there's different ways to look at it. There's that we can encourage it as cities can, or jurisdictions can then go and implement them themselves, and it's encouraged in the regional plans. It could be an add-on implementation item at some point to look at a regional Vision Zero plan, and that's something that most jurisdictions could agree on, or that CCTA decides that's the direction they want to go in. It can also be used for project prioritization. I'll let Megan kind of.
I think that the most bold way you could go would be to adopt Vision Zero for CCTA as part of this plan. That would be, to say this is the commitment that, there would need to be then a Vision Zero effort that would follow on to that. But that'd kind of be the most intense way to interpret it, would be that that's going to be one of the goals, and that there will be an action item around doing all the data analysis and creating the task force and kind of those aspects. But then it could just be more informational if that's not as bold as you want to go, to kind of encourage that, to allocate funding to that during various grant opportunities, and assume that that's going to be more done at the local level. Contra Costa County is going to do one already. They're gearing up to do it. And I think I had read that that's part of the next planning work that's coming here, too, is that there may be Vision Zero. So it may already be something that's kind of thought about it internally. But.
And I will say that one of the implementation tasks that's in the recently, last week, adopted a countywide transportation plan does include an implementation task, and I can't remember the exact wording, but it's exploring Vision Zero and seeing how the authority can support the Vision Zero concept. What that means exactly is something that we would have to explore, and the planning staff is talking about how exactly we're going to go about that. Vision Zero as a concept is easy to endorse. The next step would be to try to put that into place. A lot of Vision Zero plans are very data-driven, where you go through and you look at what your situation is, where the problems are, and prioritize improvements to achieve Vision Zero. There are technological advances that we're looking at that might be able to help. Autonomous vehicles are one way of doing that. But there are also harder things that jurisdictions have put into place, especially lower speed limits and enforcing them. It's something you could do with autonomous vehicles, but one of the key strategies that Sweden put in place when they were the first country, they were the ones who invented Vision Zero. One of the first things they did was to lower speed limits, which has had a dramatic impact on the severity of accidents. Look it up, Paul. It's true.
Okay. No, I believe it's true. But how do you do that in California, where you have to use critical speed to set your speed limits if you want it to be upheld in court?
You change the 85th percentile rule, which I mean, there's
You changed the vehicle code?
Yeah, there's some subset of the Vision Zero implementation that I think is a Sacramento subset, allowing us to do remote speed enforcement. We can't do in California either. But there's kind of a NACTO within California, so kind of like the larger cities within California they all have Vision Zero coordinators, and all of them are talking to each other about what are the kind of legislative changes that have to happen on that component versus things that like the cities and counties can do of their own accord. But there's certainly a blend of both, I think.
We won't call them CACTO.
Thank you.
All right, anything else?
I guess the only other comment I can think of right now is regarding the timing of the online town hall. It seems to me, just based on experience, that the evening is probably going to garner more traffic. And I would even venture to say if there's flexibility to go more like 7 p.m. because of the way that the regional commute is in the fall, well, particularly anytime, I guess, but I don't know if many people are back back home by 6 in a lot of cases.
Bruce?
With regard to the online town hall, I participated in a previous CCTA online town hall that was supposed to be 2 hours long from X time to X time, and there were 400 people who called in who indicated they wanted to say something, and right at the end of the 2 hours, boom, in. That's it, no more, gone, everybody else shut up. It seems to me once we start the town hall, we ought to continue it infinitely until everybody that's willing to hang in there finally says, okay, I got my say, or okay, I got to go to sleep because I got to go to work tomorrow. But cutting it off exactly at the given time seems to me to be counterproductive.
Well, one of the things, since I'm going to probably be there, I'm not sure you want me to stay up infinitely long. Who knows what I'll say? But one thing that's going to be different is that this won't be a phone-in, that it'll be online and that people will submit comments. In that way, people won't be waiting to say something. They can just say it. And we'll be collecting all the comments we receive and all the questions. We'll try to respond to sort of the themes that we hear in the meeting, but we won't be necessarily responding to specific questions or specific callers. So if we get a lot of questions about what is a low traffic stress network, what does that mean, then we'll try to group them into a single response to multiple questions or multiple comments that we get. So that way we can avoid the infinitely long call-in, but still get all the comments heard and when we be able to compile them all.
Brad, I have a question on the town hall. We're only going to have one, correct? And I'm curious, is there any way we could have two, like one at a lunchtime and one in the evening? Is that possible, or is that, yeah?
It's not in our budget.
Okay.
I mean, it's possible we could have one every day for the next year, but it's definitely not in our budget.
It'll be recorded, though, so people will be able to go on after and still be able to vote and do that for, I don't think we've set exactly how long we'll leave it open for, but it'll be recorded to view after.
Okay.
So for those that couldn't make the live version, there will be a follow-up.
Okay.
So they may not have the same live interactive voting, but there will be a SurveyMonkey voting follow-up that they can participate with.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
A
Bruce?
question, what's the difference between the town hall and the interactive map, except that the town hall has an ending and the interactive map is ongoing, continuous for a longer period of time?
The interactive web map is more geared toward telling where you want to see improvements in the actual network itself. So where you want to see improvements to walking and biking, as opposed to the larger concepts of what will go into the plan development. So it's more specifically focused on the recommended projects as opposed to the strategies for the plan.
And we do ask if there are places that you think are great that you want to see replicated throughout the county. So it's both, but it's, as Patrick says, very much place-based, as opposed to the general ideas that we'll be discussing at the town hall.
A lot of which will go into the development of the low-stress regional network. So
So place-based getting bicyclists off Highway 4 between Willow Pass Road and Port Chicago Highway is, that's a very high-stress route.
Do you have a wish list in general that you can send us of these? Because I've been writing, every time you've said a specific project, I'm writing it down. But if you have, you know, your top 20 or your top 40, like, if any of you have, like, that would be really valuable to us at this point to make sure that we have a good starting point for some of those key barriers, critical connections that you want to see.
Thank you. I appreciate your concern. I spent a couple of hours on that map.
Great. Okay, so it's already in our map.
I hope it is. I kind of split my time between the Caltrans map and this map. I'll go back and check and make sure. But thank you. Thank you very much. You want 40 projects that I want to see built, huh?
I mean, that's, you guys know this better than we do in terms of this, you know, where the need is. And that's usually in these bike plans, that's one of our starting points, is just getting the whole list together. And then we can prioritize and refine it, but we want to get the list.
You've made quite a few lists that you sent me in the past years that we're still working on.
Right, okay.
All right. Any other questions, comments? No. No, Brett?
No, I'm done.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. But I was going to ask, we go to the Caltrans District 4 bicycle plan, or should we do lunch first, or how?
What would be your pleasure? We can do either.
Actually, wouldn't mind having lunch right now, so.
Okay, we can pause and then we'll come back.
Actually, I do have a question with that, with the bicycle plan. Is it just an internal meeting? There's no staff from District 4? That's why I'm
They were going to be here, both the consultant and the District 4 staff, but they had a conflict that I guess they didn't know about when they asked to be on this agenda.
Oh, okay.
But I do have their presentation, even though it says Alameda on it. This is, I guess, the one they're going to present it on October 5th to the Alameda CTC BPAC.
Okay.
But we can take a little break for lunch, and then I can get the presentation that Hugh sent me.
If that's fine with everybody else. Okay.
How long is the presentation?
As long as I'm, as fast as I can get through it.
Infinite, Brad. We want infinite.
No, it will not be infinitely long.
We'll break. We'll do a quick break for lunch, and then we'll come back for the presentation of the District 4 bike plan. All right. I'd like to reconvene the CBPAC meeting. The next item on the agenda is the Caltrans District 4 bicycle plan. Brad?
Thank you. I'm here in the stead of Hugh Loach and Sergio Ruiz, who are the consultant and Caltrans staff who are leading the Caltrans District 4 bicycle plan. And they've been underway for a while, and I'll try to do my best to replicate what Hugh would have said. The plan covers all the Bay Area, all 9 counties, and the idea is that it would build on towards an active California, which is the state bicycle plan. This one would focus specifically on the Bay Area and go beyond just the policy plan that the state plan is, and identify and prioritize investments, particular investments, to improve bicycling on and across state-owned highway transportation network. Some of them are freeways, some of them are arterial roadways like Highway 123, which is San Pablo Avenue in western Contra Costa, and to create a connected, comfortable, and safe bicycling network. The first round of outreach was held this spring. They had focus groups, they had community workshops, there was the online mapping survey that Mr. Olson said he spent time on earlier. The second round is going to happen this fall, and they're going to try to confirm bicycle needs, review their draft priority locations and projects, and they're looking at 3 locations for the workshops: Oakland, Petaluma, and Menlo Park, and they will have a virtual online version as well. This is what their basic approach is. They have a needs analysis, and then it would feed into 2 different issues. One, where does the state transportation system create challenges and barriers to bicycling? And second, where is their current demand or demand for bicycling on or across the highway system? And they're both important. You have to know where your problems are and then where your demand is to come up with the priorities. And they are looking at existing conditions, barriers, and looking at level of traffic stress analysis, similar to sort of what we're doing in the Countywide bicycle pedestrian plan. And then they're also doing their surveys: where I bike, where I'd like to bike, and to use the MTC demand estimates from the MTC's model. Here are some, and I haven't seen these yet, and I'm on the technical coordinating committee for them. They're looking at some different, these are the highway segments or parts of the system that Caltrans controls, and they're looking at different categories of where there are issues. And this is using the level of traffic stress networks thresholds. So they're looking at a variety of project types that they're going to be prioritizing. There are the maintenance and just striping projects, minor projects like enhanced crossings, and then the major projects: projected intersections, roundabouts, overcrossings and undercrossings that we talked about earlier, and even reconstructing interchanges. The implementation is to be the purpose is to be relatively comprehensive about bike needs, but they're trying also to think about the implementation, how to once you've identified your priorities, how do you get them implemented? And they're thinking that a lot of them could be, the simpler ones anyway, could be implemented as part of roadway resurfacing. That's part of everyday and ongoing Caltrans work. Additional funding from SB1 through the ATP program or otherwise could be a means to implement the priorities in the plan. And Caltrans is interested in being a partner with local jurisdictions where they might have a project they're looking to fund through ATP. And the county might think about that with any improvements around the intersection at Bailey Road and near the BART station, for example. Most jurisdictions in the county, and there are a couple who don't, but most jurisdictions in the county have some part of the state highway system or otherwise Caltrans controlled facilities in their jurisdictions. Moraga, Clayton are 2 that don't, but I can't think of anyone else any other jurisdiction in the county that doesn't have a state transportation facility going through their jurisdiction. So there are opportunities to work with Caltrans to get some of those issues at on-ramps, for example, or try to get overcrossings or interchange redesigns as part of this. So what they're looking for is to try to get people to know about the plan and to try to get involved in the workshops and the follow-up surveying that's going to be going on along with the workshops. So that's my presentation. I don't think I can answer too many of your questions since I'm not directing the project, but it is something that's going on, and it's something to be aware of and to try to provide some input to.
Paul?
Is that PowerPoint available somewhere?
If you want, I can send it out to the CB PAC.
Thank you.
Brett, question. Is there the CB PAC, or will we need to respond to anything on this, or officially respond, or?
No, not officially.
Okay.
We're looking, what Hugh and Sergio would like is to get the word out that it's going on, that if your jurisdiction or another jurisdiction who's not here or isn't on the BPAC, or if you could share it with the RTBC TAC when you attend those meetings, let them know it's going on and that Caltrans and the consultant are interested in getting your input. That's why they were going to be here today.
James?
Brad, what level of integration do you think might occur between the CBPP effort and this region-wide effort?
Well, we're hoping that we can get their analysis and try to incorporate it as much as we can into what the consultants are doing. Alta is the one it's the consulting firm working on the District 4 plan. But I will ask, once they get their needs analysis information put together, I'll share it with our consultants and see if they can incorporate it.
Brad, one more question. You said you sit on a technical committee for this, correct?
Yes.
And I'm curious to know, what kind of issues have come up at the technical committee that's come up as a result of the development of this? Any notable?
We haven't gotten to that point. There was a meeting on progress on it, but I was out of the state at the time. It was vacation time for me, and I couldn't change my vacation. I had some commitments, so I haven't seen what needs assessment they've put together. That's something I'll have to pick up with Hugh and Sergio.
Okay, thanks. Paul?
Can we expect an update on this at our next meeting?
If there's something to update
Okay.
you about, yes.
Any other questions?
Could staff of the CCTA forward to the interest group, including the CBPAC, the dates of the various meetings that they're going to have, Oakland, Petaluma, and wherever the other one was?
Menlo Park?
Menlo Park.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, no further discussion on that. Let's move on to item 7, briefing on outcomes for the second cycle of PBTF funding. Brad.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you an update on on what we did as part of the second cycle of PBTF funding. It's been about a year ago that we started. September 23rd, the authority released the call for projects, and we got 76 applications. A few of them were withdrawn, but it was a long process. But we did allocate $91 million altogether, including some funding for the authority to continue its CMA role. The BPAC, as you know, reviewed the applications for the PBTF funding, and there was about $7.9 million in funding allocated to 9 projects. Those projects are listed on page 2. West County did the best on that in the scoring. East County did the worst. Sorry to say, but the project and the process did some things that we'd hoped it would do, and that we were able to get bigger projects and have fewer projects go through the Caltrans local assistance process. The average, let me see, I think I wrote it down here. In the first cycle of OBAG and Measure J, they were separate. But when you combine them, we allocated $70 million to 79 projects with an average grant of about $890,000. The largest grant was about $6 million and the smallest $50,000. In this cycle, all 3 programs were combined, and we programmed about $88 million to 61 projects. $88 million to 61 projects. And the average grant size was about $1.4 million. So it was substantially larger average. The largest grant was $9.3 million. So it's about half again as large as the $6 million in the first cycle. And the smallest was $320,000. So we did a lot more, on average, a lot bigger projects than we did in the first round. In addition, and this is one of the things we hoped to do, about 10 of the 61 projects received funding from more than one funding source. So there were a lot of projects that received both Measure J and OBAG funding, or from 2 different OBAG programs. And that was one of the things we were hoping to do, to try to coordinate the different projects and to get some, to use an old buzzword, synergy among the programs. But even so, there were some difficulties with the program and the process. Were the criteria and the requirements the right ones? They did overlap, but they do have slightly different criteria and purposes. For example, TLC can fund plans, PBTF funds can't. So how do you allocate funding? How can you coordinate the funding if they have some projects are eligible for one source and some parts aren't? And each of the programs had different criteria that were applied. They also had different review groups. The BPAC reviewed the PBTF funding. There was an OBAG Measure J working group that looked at the OBAG funding, the competitive OBAG funding. The RTPCs looked at the Safe Routes to School funding and the TLC funding. And there may be some simpler way or maybe more coordinated way to review the applications. And because there were these different programs with the different criteria, the applications might have been bigger than they needed to be, and maybe there are ways to get the applications to be simpler and easier for sponsors to fill out. I do know that there's, at least secondhand, I've heard that some sponsors were wished that we didn't have such a complicated application or that we didn't have the different the programs combined, or at least some of them, so that they had all these applications to fill out at the same time, if they had multiple projects they were applying for funding for. So we're looking at ways to improve the process, and I'm thinking of trying to pull together some kind of group of stakeholders, people who reviewed the projects, people who didn't, who put in applications, people involved in reviewing the projects, to see if there are ways to make the process work better. And I'm thinking of asking at the next meeting if there are volunteers from the BPAC to serve on that. So that's my presentation. It's just sort of a setup for the next BPAC meeting.
Any questions or comments? All right, none? All right. Oh.
So
Okay.
are we taking comments on the process, or we're waiting for a quorum at the next?
Well, we could, if you have any, if you've heard any comments.
Just one. As far as the scoring itself, I recall that there were gradients of, like, I can't remember which category it was, but it was 0 to 15 out of 100. But I think, one category was ranked this application from 0 to 15, and you could give it like a 11 or 8 or whatever. To me, a score of that range is kind of difficult to gauge as opposed to 0 to 5 or 0 to 10, because once you get beyond 10, I think it becomes unwieldy as far as what's the difference between an 8 and 11. Not really sure. Just a comment for consideration.
That's an interesting one, yeah. I can see what you mean.
On the other hand, if we have a very wide point spread and the graders don't just go 20, 30, 40, 50, but go 11, 39, 42, it makes it easier for the person who is adding them up to actually differentiate and put the projects in order. All right, I'll shut up.
Any other comments? I was going to say that, I think this is a good item to talk about. It's only disappointing. It's just disappointing that not all the CBPAC members showed up. Is this something we could talk about some more, like at the next meeting, and hopefully more committee members show up? Because I think I'd like to talk about it, because if not, it's probably we're all going to forget about it, and then when the next round of PBTF comes around, we'll be at the same place we were last time.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up. And I thought it would be good to have people from who play different roles in the process, either as applicant or as a reviewer, and also as people who are sort of on the outside, to see whether they thought that the results were the best given the purposes of the different funding programs. I have heard some comments about the results not being what they could be sour grapes too. So I shouldn't. That some people thought that some of the projects shouldn't have been funded. I've gotten some outside comments from outside people who weren't an applicant, who weren't a reviewer, who thought at least a couple of the projects were not as good a project as the authority should have chosen.
Actually, yeah. With that, is there? Can we continue this discussion to the next meeting, or would that be appropriate? Or, so like I said, it'd be nice to have more of the committee members here. And the other one, now I'm thinking about it because James mentioned it. Could you provide like that scoring sheet again so we can take a look at it? Because I've actually kind of forgotten.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, the scoring sheet, yeah, I guess the scoring, the projects, yeah, that'd be nice. Thank you. Or Bruce?
Off the top of my head, I can think of two projects that got funded that I don't think should have been funded. One was the ped and bike bridge over in San Ramon. What was it, over
Golden
Canyon
Canyon.
Road? One of those roads. The traffic signal would have worked just fine, but it would have screwed up the level of service. So the traffic engineers wanted that bridge, and we spent, what, 15 million? We wasted 15 million bucks, although it'll be fun to have, but it's gold-plated and we don't need it. And the other was an East Bay Regional Park plan over there in Rodeo somewhere, where we took it off the access road to the park and we put it next to the access road. But the only people driving in and out on that access road were going to the park, and the access road was only a couple of 100 yards long. You remember this one? And the very light traffic, the bicyclists could certainly have shared that road, but we spent millions of dollars on putting the path beside that road. It looks good having a complete network, but it seems to me we ought to spend the money a little better. However.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Anything else?
Yeah, no, what else can you say?
Okay, we'll move on then to item number 8, the MTC's Active Transportation Working Group.
Yeah, we put in, unfortunately, the wrong meeting, but the packet was going out the same day that the meeting was being held, which was last Thursday. But at the last Thursday's Active Transportation Working Group, there was, I handed out the agenda, there was discussion of the bike, excuse me, the bike ped count program that MTC is starting. They do have budget for doing some initial work on it. One of the things that they're going to try to put in place is a repository of all the bike ped accounts in the county. And one of the tricks with that is to come up with a common data format so that when you submit the count that you've taken, and the authority takes different counts, when we do the CMP monitoring, is to have it in a particular format so that it can be incorporated. Apparently, SCAG in Southern California has a similar program, and that's one of the things, that is the one program, the model that they're looking at replicating here in the Bay Area. There is a data subcommittee that's working on this, and there is some funding set aside. It's not a lot, but for the consultant work, but apparently MTC staff is going to do a lot of the legwork in putting together the program. One of the other items of interest is something called advisory bike lanes. What is an advisory bike lane? There is a advisory paper that Alta put together. Advisory bike lanes are kind of an improvement. You can think of them as an improvement over sharrows. You don't use them on heavily or high-speed roadways. You use them where there's relatively narrow pavement with or without parking, but apparently they work better with parking. And instead of having a solid bike lane marked on the street, you have a dashed line. I know the engineer in the audience is skeptical of this, But there are a number of case studies well, there are a lot of them in Europe, but there are several case studies that are in this paper. And I can send out a link to the paper where you can get it. And it has worked pretty well in places like Boulder and Edina, Minnesota, some places in New England. And basically, the pavement that's left after the parking can't be more than 20 feet. You don't mark a center line in it. And if there's a bicyclist in the advisory bike lane, then the drivers go around, but they can go into the bike lane when it's not occupied by a bicyclist. And that's the basic idea. There is a custom sign that illustrates that's been used at a couple of locations. Apparently it's worked pretty good. There's been one accident, and that's when a driver sideswiped another parked vehicle. They originally thought of using it in low-speed residential areas where there wasn't a lot of pavement, but some jurisdictions have found that they work pretty well in sort of side streets and commercial districts where there's limited pavement, but there's bicycle demand. So if you wanted to direct through bicycle movement onto this side street, kind of like a bike boulevard, but not a bike boulevard, you can have these advisory lanes, and I think they used them in Minneapolis. There's a case study in, I think it's either Minneapolis or St. Paul. I can't remember. One of the twin cities. And apparently it's been very successful.
Where is this dashed line in relationship to the park lane?
So you'd have like 8 feet of parking space, and then you'd have the line would be 5 feet, 6 feet into the pavement. And no center line. Yeah.
So a reaction, it's trying to encourage a person who is afraid of traffic to bicycle out in traffic.
Yeah. The idea, you wouldn't use it on a street with a lot of traffic. You'd want it to be a fairly low speed, low volume street. That's the only place it would work. And I don't think in the presentation that Brett Hondorp from Alta gave, he showed a graph that was volume and speed, and where they were both low, that's where the best place to put one of these advisory bike lanes. Then the speed got higher and volume got higher. Then there's a gray area, whether you have to decide whether you'd want to do it or not. And then there was, forget about it. That was the majority of the.
Makes it the roadway safer for the bicyclists, I assume?
They haven't had any bicycle accidents. The only accident was vehicle on vehicle.
Is that compared to without? Have you done any comparison studies?
I can't remember if they did a before study, but most of these jurisdictions have done after studies, and they've been successful. They've achieved what they wanted.
Yeah, bring it on. We'll put some in Pittsburgh.
We'll look into it.
All right. Any other questions, comments on this? All right. Thank you, Brad. We'll go to the next item, item 9, other business or information sharing. Anybody have anything else to add to the meeting today? All right. I guess we'll go to the last item here, item 10, next meeting date and agenda. I see here the next CBPAC meeting is supposed to be on Monday, November 27th, but I know that's around Thanksgiving time, so.
That's the Monday after Thanksgiving.
So is that, anybody have a preference on the Monday before, the Monday after
The
Thanksgiving?
last time we did it, we moved it up a week.
Okay.
So it was the Monday before Thanksgiving rather than the Monday after.
Okay, anyone have any preference? Yeah, I'm fine with the 20th. Yeah.
27th?
Or 27th or 20th. I'm fine with either one, so.
No preference.
Well, maybe I could,
Actually, if you might want to ask the other,
yeah, I'll send out something. We're in the middle of getting a new administrative assistant, so I'm still trying to get everyone to set stuff up for me. But I can send out or do a doodle poll to all the CBPAC members and have them tell me which they prefer, or just an email maybe is simpler. Do you prefer the 20th or the 27th?
okay, yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Okay, I'll do that.
All right, thank you, Brad. And with that, we are adjourned to the next meeting in November. All right, thanks, Brad.